After the newness of a relationship wears off, the reasons for putting in the effort show up. What are those reasons? And what are the efforts that produce the greatest return? Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm excited to answer the question that we're asking here today, and that is, are relationships worth the effort? I have been married for almost 34 years. I have 4 children, 5 grandchildren, and 1 on the way this summer. I guess you could call me officially a family man. And I'm in an exciting part of my life where I feel like I'm able to really kind of give back now. And I've got a lot of years ahead of me to do that. And one of the things that I'm most passionate about is helping families get healthy, physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. And I get this question a lot. Either people ask it directly or they'll infer it. Is it really worth it? I mean, it's hard work. We know that relationships are hard work. But is it worth the effort? And then what are those efforts? And that's really what I want to tackle with you today. I want to answer both of those questions and hopefully in a way that produces some ways for you to think about this. Let me just give you the reasons first, because there's some efforts I want to get to, but let me give you the reasons why I believe that they really are worth the work. The first reason is that people are wired to not just survive, but thrive in community. So you might as well have a good one. I mean, your first community is your family. I mean, that's how we enter the world, the things that we need more than anything else. Words, touch, emotional connection, belonging. These are the things that research has shown that we cannot live without these things. There's a researcher by the name of Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstad. And in 2017, she did a study on these things. And she indicates that social isolation and loneliness kill more people than obesity. Think about that. She also says that social connection means a 50% reduction in an early death. It is the number one indicator for low mortality, is loneliness. I mean, I think we have a loneliness pandemic. More people report loneliness now than ever. So healthy relationships are worth the effort just for that purpose alone, because we are wired to not just survive, but to thrive in community. And it is how we enter this world. The second reason is because happier people have greater social support systems. It's just true. I mean, this means that you have to invest in long-term relationships, not just short-term relationships. Occasionally I have a client that challenges me here and thinks they can just live from shallow relationship to shallow relationship, and it isn't the case. Because it's through our social support networks where we work through and where we persevere hard times. It's in those networks where we figure out that we're not alone, that we're not crazy, that we're experiencing things that other people are also experiencing. That same research study by Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstad indicates there's a stronger correlation between social support and happiness as there is between smoking and cancer. Reaching out to others for support, it increases our healing factor, drum roll, by 63%. 63%. So people with long-term healthy social support systems are happier. And when I say a social support system, I'm not talking about just a group of people. I mean like multiple groups of people that often don't know each other. Sometimes they do, but you're the common denominator. And it's this feeling of connectedness when we create these groups of people and this network of support for different purposes and different reasons in different places. And as we get older, that becomes more important, not less. So that's the second reason. I think that research would bear out here that happier people have greater social support networks. Let me give you a third reason. Maturing relationships, this one's really cool. Maturing relationships are more fulfilling over the long term than short-term relationships. And the fact is, like, relationships are like people. Like, either we grow or we die. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in a mature relationship, you are giving more than you're taking, and so is your partner. That's huge. In a long-term, maturing relationship, you and your partner are giving more than you're taking. Let me use a quantum physics example here. You take one draft horse that can pull 7,000 pounds, and if you put 2 draft horses together, some of you probably already know this, you pull 21,000 pounds or so. It's like a 3x return, so it doesn't make sense. Except when you figure out that in healthy relationships, That there's service, there's sacrifice, there's delayed gratification, there's waiting, there's concern for others. And what you end up doing is when you put two people together with that type of long-term mindset, you end up pulling more weight together than any one of you can pull by yourself, or even just if you just double that number, it's more than that. Healthy relationships are worth the effort. Now, let's switch gears for just a minute because I want to share what those efforts are, because there's a lot of them. I mean, I do this for a living. I teach communication with people all day long, and I understand that better communication and lower conflict and higher confidence levels and better self-care and individuating and breathing and individual and intimacy and all these constructs that are important for relationships to work. I want to boil it down to three even more broad but very specific ideas. The first one is predictability. That's the ability to predict. And I'm not talking about on a toxic level here. I'll come back to that. One of the things I love to teach with the couples that I work with is predictable communication platforms. And every couple needs them. And we call it couch time. You can call it back porch time. You can call it drive time. You can call it weekend getaway time, whatever you call it. It's, essentially, couples have to be able to predict that they're going to work through stuff. They're going to communicate. They're going to solve problems. They're going to come together. They're going to connect on an emotional level. They're going to do these things that are really predictors for long-term relationships. I'm not talking about predictability about toxicity. I'm not talking about the predictability that we're not going to talk about this, or that we're going to kick this down the road, or we're going to shove it under the rug, or we're going to act like nothing's wrong, or we're going to just do our own thing and maybe distract and defer. And that's not what I'm talking about. That's not the kind of predictability. I'm talking about the predictability we know we are going to solve problems, and if we don't necessarily solve it, we're going to keep trying. The kind of predictability where we know that if this doesn't work, then we're going to try something else that may be working. If that doesn't work, we're going to get professional help, and we're going to ask someone, whether it's a close friend or a trusted advisor or a counselor, and we're going to ask people for help to take us to the level that's going to allow us to be able to produce the kind of fruit that it takes to have a long-term relationship. So, predictability, predictable communication platforms. I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to be a four-lane highway of communication where both of us actively listen, where we're trying to understand what the other person's saying rather than thinking about what we're saying before the other person's even done talking. And a platform is something you can stand on. It's a solid place. And when you have those, call them whatever you want to, but they have to be predictable, they have to be communicative, and they have to be solid. And when you've got that, when you have predictability in your relationship, you are solidifying that long-term effort that ends up producing the kind of social support system that you both need in order to thrive. Second reason, or the second effort rather, it's responsibility, the ability to respond. And just like predictability, we have developed the predictability, or the ability to predict. We have to be able to have the ability to respond to needs and wants in a relationship. By definition, I don't know if you realize this or not, but a relationship has needs and wants. It has needs and wants just by definition alone. A relationship has to have points of reference. It has to have ways to relate. I mean, this means that there have to be common areas of connection. Otherwise, you don't have a relationship. I mean, just because you're married doesn't mean you're building a relationship. Just because you're dating, exclusive, engaged, partnered, those are just labels. A relationship has needs. And the very nature of a relationship is that there have to be common points of interest carried out, understood, fostered, and then moved. Like they have to move in a forward direction in order to have what you would consider a relationship. Healthy relationships, essentially, it's more than when more than one person is growing in their ability to respond to needs, not merely reacting when their needs are not being met. That's not a relationship. It might be something else, but it's not a point of reference where two people are producing instead of just always taking. So, yeah, relationships are worth the effort, but your efforts have to be consistent with your ability to respond to needs and wants besides your own. Third effort. Your relational identity. You have to have a relational identity in order for relationships to move forward. In any relationship, you have identity layers. So just take, for example, I have multiple layers and roles. So I'm a son, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a grandfather, I'm a partner, I'm a business partner, a citizen. I have a lot of hats, a lot of roles. I'm a coach, I'm a trainer, I'm a friend. And all of those bear different responsibilities. And I have a relationship to myself. And so I have to be honest and committed in all of my relationships. And the more committed and the more honest I am, the longer they last. In other words, you have to have an identity that matches the relational requirements. If I'm married, then I have to have a married mindset. If I'm single, I have to have a single person's mindset. If I'm exclusive, I have to have an exclusive person's mindset. Here's where relationships suffer is when you confuse your mindset with your identity. In other words, if you're married, you can't act like a single person. If you're single, you shouldn't have to respond like you're married. And so identity confusion is a death wish in a relationship. And that even includes your relationship with you. And I've talked about that in other videos before about self-care and those kinds of things and relational identity. And you have to be congruent with what's required in the relationship in order for it to have a future. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you're becoming wiser. Doesn't mean you're becoming more mature. If you're in a relationship, then there is an expectation that you and your partner are growing, are maturing. One of the worst things that you or your spouse could ever say or your partner could ever say to you is, well, you knew I was like this when you got with me. I mean, like, nobody ever gets married to someone hoping they will have an adolescent brain with a single person's mindset. Nobody does that. Can I be blunt with you for a minute? If you're with somebody and you want to remain with that somebody, be someone they would never want to leave. Don't become someone that no one would want to stay with. I know it sounds so simplistic, and I hope it doesn't sound sarcastic because I'm not being that way. But if I could be for just a minute, let me tell you some things that I never hear from people. I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But I don't hear people say these things. I don't hear people say, you know what, I love it when you never let me know when you're coming or when you're going. I enjoy it when you are out of your mind or intoxicated or on something and you're just totally emotionally unavailable. I love it when you're unresponsive, moody, short-tempered, unpredictable. That really turns me on. I really enjoy it when you spend our money on stuff instead of needs. I like it when you're out with your friends instead of with me, when you're on the phone with your mom instead of spending time with us together. I love it when you forget to ask me about my doctor's appointments, our anniversary, my birthday, or things that I asked for you to do for me. I like it when you're mean to my kids or when you seldom have time for them. When you make more excuses than exceptions, that's my jam. I like it when you have more criticism than blessings, more energy to build a case against me than a future for us. I never hear that. And I'm sorry if that sounds sarcastic, but I'll tell you why. Because when people start talking that way, because maybe you have heard that, it's because they assume that sarcasm and cynicism is maybe the only tool and they haven't left in their toolbox, and then they might as well use it to see what happens. Become someone that no one would ever want to leave. Don't become someone that no one would ever want to stay with. Have an identity that is congruent with the relationship that you're in, with these efforts, with the ability to predict, the ability to respond, and a relational identity that just makes common sense for the relationship that you're in. I believe with all my heart that relationships are worth the effort. And I believe those efforts that we've outlined here are just not the only ones, but perhaps some of the most important. And if you put these into play in your relationship, you will discover that you can turn a relationship around pretty quickly. I would not presume to assume that this would work for someone in an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship. Sometimes, let me give you something to think about, sometimes people can run out of try. They can run out of energy to put forward any more efforts. And I certainly hope that's not where you're at, but if any of us stays on a destructive path long enough, that's where we probably end up. Arresting that, however, is not impossible. It's absolutely doable. I see it all the time in the work that I get to do. And if there's something that we can do to encourage you or help you, or just maybe address something that you'd like to talk about, or to listen to, then let us know, and we'll be happy to look at that content for you. I hope this was encouraging to you and helpful. If you haven't subscribed, do that. If you haven't shared and there's somebody that could use this, then share it with them. You know, we're here to help people, and so we hope this has been an encouragement for you today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.